Hi, I'm Josuna, and in this video I'm going to be talking about my experience with my study abroad application interviews. So I actually already have a video talking about my application experience with all of them, so if you want to know more about that, then go check out that video, but I'm going to be jumping right into the interviews. So this is all just my personal experience, so hopefully it can give you some insight into what it might be like for you if you're interested in applying, or be helpful to you in any way. I applied to 3 different study abroad programs this year: SYA, YFU, and NSLI. And NSLI I eventually actually ended up getting accepted into, and I'm planning on studying abroad in Taiwan next year for a full year. So all my interviews were pretty similar, but I'm going to talk about them in the order that they happened, so starting with SYA, and then YFU, and then NSLI. So all of my study abroad programs told me that I was going to be contacted by the person who would interview me to schedule my interview. So the first person that reached out to me was the person who was going to interview me for SYA. And they emailed me and they were like, hey, when are you available to do the interview? And gave me a couple of times and told me that they would send me the Zoom link when it would be time, and I emailed them back and said, hey, this date works for me. So the only experience that I've ever had with interviews before was applying for private schools when I was in 8th grade, so already 2 years ago. So basically, I haven't interviewed a lot, and this was kind of new for me and a little nerve-wracking. I started by doing plenty of research about SYA, about other people's interview tips and interview experiences, just like you're probably doing right now. And so I compiled a list of potential things that I wanted to talk about, like situations that I've been through or just things about myself. And then the way that I practiced is I looked up potential questions online and I would answer them out loud as soon as I read the question, so I wouldn't have any time to think about it and I'd have to answer it on the spot, just like you would while interviewing. However, I was really nervous, so I think I definitely over-practiced to the point where I had literally every single possible answer for every possible question memorized word for word, and I highly do not recommend getting to this point. I recommend practicing to the point where you're comfortable and you know the topics and ideas that you want to talk about, but not to the point where you're stressed out and over-practicing unnecessarily. So when I had my interview for SYA, the interviewee was actually an alumni of the program herself. So that was a really great opportunity for me to be able to ask her any questions I had about the program, and we actually did end up talking for a while in the end of the interview about everything that I was curious about, from extracurriculars to day-to-day, etc., etc. Then a few weeks later, I got my email to schedule my interview for YFU. So the preparation for YFU was actually a little bit easier for me because I was actually able to just look up online the questions that they were supposed to ask the students, and there was a list of questions that they were required to read word for word to the student. So I just memorized all those questions and memorized exactly how I wanted to answer them. And I also prepared a little bit like how I did for SYA, just in case they ended up asking me a different question. And I also prepared a few questions I wanted to ask them. So the man that I interviewed with was really nice, and I was right. He actually did end up reading those questions word for word, so answering was really easy, and that interview was probably the least stressful for me because I already had all the answers prepared beforehand. On February 1st, I received my email to schedule my interview with NSLI. And this one was the one that I was the most nervous about because it was the program that I wanted to get into the most. It was the one with the full scholarship, so I was really nervous about this one. And I prepared kind of like how I did for SYA, where I prepared situations, stories, and things that I wanted to talk about myself. And I also looked up some NSLI specific questions, which was really helpful. They said that NSLI often asked about things like, why do you think this program is important? So this interview actually turned out to be the hardest interview for me because my interviewee asked me questions for things that I was not prepared for. She asked me to come up with situations that were really, really specific. Like, for example, she asked me to think of a non-academic situation that I was embarrassed that I handled well, and how did I handle it, and what did I learn from it? So I had actually prepared an embarrassing situation if they asked me for that, but it was academic, so I needed to think of a non-academic situation on the spot. So I actually had to tell her, that's a really good question. Like, would you mind giving me a moment to think about it? And I'm really glad that I did that, because I actually came up with a whole bunch of situations in my head that probably wouldn't have been that good to say during my interview, but I thought of one and I said it, and I was actually thinking of, you know, like what I learned from it as I was saying it. But the key thing that I think that I did there was I acted like I knew what I was talking about, and I was confident. And I think that was really helpful. And then I think she was also really interested in me too, because when I told her that I have a small business where I sew and sell swimwear, she started asking me all these questions. She was like, oh, do you like fashion? Do you do this? Do you do that? How do you do it? And she actually recommended a TV show for me. So I think that was something that actually benefited me, is that I was talking about something that she was clearly interested in too, and we actually ended up having like a conversation about it. So if you have an interview coming up and you're worried about it, just know that I had 3 interviews in a row without a single bad experience. And all of my anxiety around it was completely unnecessary. Just do your best and be yourself. Thank you for watching, and if you want to see the written version of this, make sure to check out my blog linked below, and like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.